Yeah, so how I found the podcast, I think just one day, I think honestly I was feeling a little bit homesick for Pakistan in a way, if that makes any sense, and just was searching around to see what podcasts are out there. I think honestly what I started looking for was a podcast, strangely enough, on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It's a Belt and Road initiative, and seeing if there's anybody putting stuff out on that. Not really many folks, but as I was doing a search in Spotify, I came across your work, and so started listening.
Hello, friends. My name is Habib Ahmed, and you are listening to Popcorn. In each episode of this show, I talk to different people from all parts of the world, and they share their lives and their thoughts with us. We all have one connection in this podcast, to Pakistan. Our guest for this episode is Kennedy Horton. Kennedy is an American, born in the US, but as a child from the ages of 7 to 15, he lived in Sindh, Pakistan, with his family. Earlier, you heard Kennedy talking about how he found the podcast. Prior to our recording, Kennedy emailed us at Popcorn and shared a very kind note. Quote, "Great podcast. I just ran across your Popcorn podcast and am enjoying it. As is probably obvious from my name, I'm not part of the Pakistani diaspora, but I grew up in Sindh and am enjoying hearing the different perspectives. Thanks for putting this out there." End quote. After moving out of Pakistan, Kennedy lived in Thailand and China, and he now resides in Ireland. In this episode, Kennedy shares a bit about his life in Pakistan and more. Oh, and one more thing, this episode is also available for listening on YouTube, so feel free to head over to our YouTube channel, Popcorn, or find the link on this episode's description to YouTube to watch the video form of this episode. You're still here? Okay, all right then. Let's get started. Let's talk to Kennedy.
Yeah, so my name's Kennedy Horton. I currently live in Dublin, Ireland, but I'm from the U.S., born in Mississippi, lived there until I was about 7, 8, and then moved with my family to Pakistan. So I've got three siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, and so the 4 of us with my parents moved to Sindh, so southern Pakistan, to the Sindh province, to first lived in Larkana, so in interior Sindh. Mm-hmm. Most people would know Larkana, if they do know Larkana, because of Mohenjo-daro. It's ancient ruins that are nearby the city. And then moved to Karachi and lived there for a little while. After Pakistan, spent some time in Thailand, graduated high school there, then went back to the States, studied Mandarin Chinese and economics and sort of international affairs. Worked for a little while and ended up in the States for a little while, and then ended up in China. I speak Chinese, so I was working for GNC supplements retailer in China, running the business there. And last year, or I guess early this year, came here to Ireland. Been here since.
Okay, cool.
Doing the same sort of job.
And what brought your family to Pakistan?
Yeah, I guess different things. My parents do sort of the NGO humanitarian relief work. And so, I guess the question would be for them, what led them to Pakistan? But we ended up there and then doing that sort of work, again, in the Sindh province mostly. And
then you said you were there when you were 7 years old. That's when you moved to Larkana.
Yeah, I think I was 8, and then, so I think I just turned 8 or so, and then moved to Larkana, lived there for 3 years, and then moved to 3 or 4 years, and moved to Karachi and lived there. I guess it was 3.5 years in both places.
In both places, yeah. So Larkana, I think I already told you Larkana. Again, I don't know much about it either. When I think of Sindh, the only city that pops into my mind is Karachi, right? The biggest city in the whole province. So
that's a shame.
Larkana, yeah. I checked on Google Maps. It's about 6 hours away, I think, by car from Karachi. Yeah. So it's not like it's even close, like Hyderabad or, some other relatively nearby city. So even I don't know much about it, and I'm sure a lot of the audience doesn't either, to be honest, especially those of us living outside of Pakistan. Honestly, when we go back, we visit our families, usually closer to the big cities, and that's where our families often are. Or if it's not a big city, then it'll be a rural area, probably not Larkana, but somewhere, and then we're kind of in that vicinity, and then we travel a little bit, but not so much in our own country sometimes. But it'd be good to understand a little bit more about life over there and how you found it. What you remember of it? I know you were a kid, but I'm sure you have some memories.
Yeah, lots, right? Lots of memories. One reason people know Larkana is that it's the largest city from where the Bhutto family's from. So Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and then Benazir Bhutto, they're from that area, and so Larkana is sort of their claimed home in a way. So really strong PPP presence. And I mean, that was, we got there in 1995, and that was sort of the PPP and the Bhutto family was a very clear influence. We even lived for a while. We lived in rented kind of the upstairs of the house of Zulfikar Bhutto's doctor, who's a bit old then. His son owned the house that we lived in, and so like it was just, I don't know, that it was a big impression. But Larkana is in the middle of the Thar Desert, so it's it's a dusty town. It's about 150,000 people. I think from yours and my perception now, be slow moving. Then there, water buffalo walking through the streets. The old Sindh Tonga horse carts, things like that. Markets.
Right. It's kind of funny actually. Even I've noticed this about Pakistan. You mentioned like a relatively small town like Larkana. We think 100,000, 150,000. Even my mom's hometown, I still call it a village. She grew up 3 hours outside of Islamabad. And that place is called, it's close to Chakwal. It's a little town called Choa.
Okay.
It's Choa. And, again, I call it a village, but it's actually 100,000 people. But over here in the U.S., if there's a town with 30,000 people, we're like, okay, that's actually a city. I'm not saying it's a big city, but it's a relative, it's relatively
a city. 30,000, yeah.
What about Karachi? Any memories over there? Which part of Karachi did you live at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we lived in one of the defense phases for a while, and then in KDA, which is an older part of Karachi. So I guess when I was in Karachi, I went to an international school, so it's a bit of a different experience. Larkana went to a local school, and we were the only foreigners around really for most of the time. So it was it's a much different, and it's just 130,000 people, but it feels like a much smaller town.
Yeah.
So I think Karachi probably is mostly focused around school. I was getting to middle school, high school at the time, so it was your life kind of revolves around school.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned 1995, right? I moved to the US in 96 from Pakistan. Oh. So I was about 6-7 years old at that time. So I have my own experience to share there. I remember the first 2 years. I honestly don't know how I passed second grade or third grade. I do not know, because I didn't know any English. I was in ESL, but those things take time to they take time to kind of really make an impact. So for the first year, I was learning English, but I was behind on everything. The teacher used to call on me. I had no idea what she was saying. Yeah. The only 3 words I remember that I knew were yes, no, and hello. Like those were the only 3 words. And I remember one time my teacher was right in the beginning. I think they took me into a separate classroom, and they knew I had no clue what they were talking about. But they asked me some questions. I still don't know to this day what those questions were. All I remember was nodding my head and saying yes, and then no, yes, no, and then they looked at each other like, "What is this guy doing?" And then that's all I remember. So I don't know how I passed, to be honest. I think I was at risk of getting left back, but that was my experience.
How old were you? You said 6, 7?
6, 7, yeah, second grade and third grade.
So I mean, one of my sons is 7 right now.
Yeah.
And he just learned English this year. Chinese is his mother tongue. And so when he moved to Ireland, he spoke, I don't even think he knew how to say yes. And we're homeschooling now because of COVID and other reasons. But in the beginning, he was in a school. And something interesting I noticed is, literally understood nothing, right? Absolute zero. He couldn't communicate. Again, he didn't even know how to say yes. But he was strangely, so if I was in that situation, I feel like pretty uncomfortable. I feel like quite self-conscious. He was shockingly cheerful, very accepting of the fact he had no idea what was going on, and strangely satisfied with it. Wow. Did you feel like that way at all?
No, I was nervous as hell. No,
it seems like a normal reaction. Okay.
Yeah, I was really scared. I remember my mom dropped me off, and on the first day of school, I cried. I cried on the first. I cried for a good week. Like I would cry in front of the teacher. I cried. The students would obviously, not look at me like I'm one of them. It was just a strange experience. It took a while to make friends and stuff. And this was not out there, by the way. This was Brooklyn, New York City. So it was a very diverse school that I went to, very diverse. There were a lot of other kids in the same boat as me. I remember even like in fifth grade, and by that point I had caught up, obviously, I was well immersed, and this other Pakistani kid was brought into my class, and they brought him in just because I was there. So I was going to be like his buddy to
Cool.
bring him up to speed. Yeah. Yeah. So I was his translator basically. So, I kind of gave him, the ropes and everything and helped him around and, kind of helped him communicate with the teacher back and forth because again, he was in the same boat as how I used to be in second grade. So this was a very diverse school, but I was nervous as hell. So it's pretty commendable about your son taking it so relaxed. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a mystery.
I mean, part of it might be, it seems like you've moved around a lot too, right? So China, you said Thailand before that. I'm not sure if your son was exposed to all that, but it seems like you're pretty much on the go throughout your life. So he might have inherited some of that adventurous mindset.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't traveled that much. That was some of his first things. I think he just has a unique personality. That's what it seems like. So, because
that's awesome.
I think my reaction would be the same as yours. That seems something I can understand a lot more.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, for you, I was going to kind of try to relate this back to you. You moved to Lorcana, you were 7 years old, right? And now you're suddenly in a completely different world. And it's not like a city like Karachi where you can have an American school possibly to go to, right? How was that experience? Do you have any memories? How did you even go to a local school? How did that work out?
Well, there was so there's government schools, and then there was a new English medium school that had just opened, really super small. I think they just had 4 classes. And so we joined that school. I was in a classroom with maybe 8, 9 other students. And so, I mean, just to put in context of what Larkana is like. So this is a private school, right? But and you're in Sindh, it's super hot, right? It's super hot, but the school doesn't have any air conditioning at all. So it's a private school, but it's still pretty basic. Everyone's sharing one glass to drink water and stuff, that sort of situation.
I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah. The Muslim glass and then the non-Muslim glass. That's,
no, I don't remember that, but
you don't remember that? That's
yeah. They had that.
Oh, of course.
They had that? Okay.
Of course.
No, that's surprising to me, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, large, like a cement water cooler, but because we weren't accustomed to drinking after people, we brought water bottles.
That makes sense. Yeah, of course.
As one would, but it's just fun, right? I mean, you're in a small class. We had, I guess, 8 to 10 students. You're just kind of hanging out and playing. You're obviously really different, being the white kid. I don't know. I have fond memories.
I'm guessing it was not an English school, right? So did you have to learn Sindhi or?
It was an English medium school. So
it was an English medium. Okay.
Yeah, there are lots of people who didn't speak much English that were there. You'd get punished if you spoke Sindhi Sindhi really. And there's a lot of Sindhi speaking, but it was an English medium school. So I took Sindhi class, Islamic class, Urdu class, but classes were in Sindhi.
Okay, so it wasn't a complete, linguistically speaking, it wasn't a complete culture shock, but
yeah, it wasn't your experience. Wasn't your experience.
Yeah. So I'm sure it's still very different, obviously. Again, it's a completely different world. I'm sure you realized that when you got there. Like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, it's really different, man. It's really different.
Very different. I think as kids, of course, when you're a kid at that age, you don't really question much.
Exactly. All right. You just do it, right?
Yeah, you just do it. It's different. You don't think about the alternatives, like,
Yeah, I mean, I felt some of that later on in different stages, but yeah, that 7, 8 years old, you're just kind of hanging out, right? You're just watching, and you having fun with people. So
yeah, do they have like physical punishments? You mentioned punishments.
Yeah, I was I was thinking back about it, and it was this weird mix of like a level of like wild freedom and severe physical punishment. So we had one teacher who used to walk around school with like a 4 foot inch thick cane and would just like indiscriminately hit kids. Like sometimes, like absolutely, we have very difficult to understand why, just very strange, some random punishment. But then, I had some teachers who were 18, 19 years old. Yeah. You could do anything with them. I mean, they wouldn't punish. It was a strange mix. So yeah, there was physical punishment, but there was there's plenty of messing around too.
Yeah. Was this a public school or a private school, like a government school?
It was a private school. Yeah.
Okay. So I told you I went to second grade here, right, in the U.S. onwards. But in first grade, I went to first grade in Pakistan. And I remember a little bit of that experience. I remember that one big water, whatever you want to call it, the tank. And there was a shared glass tank for everybody. Yeah. For the whole school, there was a shared glass. You would just drink out of that.
Was it chained on?
Yeah, it was chained on. Yeah.
Yeah.
A steel glass.
The metal cup chained on.
Yeah. That's funny. It's funny. I thought it was just my school, but I remember that. And I remember drinking out of that too. And now it's pretty gross now that I think about it. I'm kind of a germaphobe, so That was back then not
That'd
an
be very
issue,
bad
but
for you.
yeah. And the second thing I remember is getting hit on the hands with rulers. So they were thankfully not too hard on me, but like as a punishment to the whole class. If the class did something naughty, the teacher would go around and hit everybody twice on the hand. Not too hard, but just to kind of teach us a lesson. So I remember that. But my brothers, my older brothers, they dealt with a lot more. There's a lot of funny stories that came out of that. My oldest two brothers are twins, and they apparently got beat up a lot by their teachers in high school. And they tell this story a lot. They went to a government school, so it was not as structured as a private school. There wasn't a lot. Nobody really kept an eye or oversaw the teachers. Some of the teachers held grudges on their kids.
Our school is right next to a government school, and so I could hear the screaming and kids literally climbing over the wall. It seemed like it was wild, absolutely wild. It seemed like a lot of fun.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's like a jungle, honestly. And the teachers are like that too. I'm not saying this is always the case, but this was the case back then in the 90s, at least. That's how my brothers describe it. And anyway, they had one teacher who used to beat the crap out of them. They graduated, they moved on, and then my older brother, who was younger than them, went to that high school. And that same teacher beat him up, and he came home and he told my brothers. My brothers were in college at that point, so they decided. Well, one of them decided to get all his friends, like 16, college boys and stuff, and they just went and raided that school, and they just started beating up the teachers. And apparently, that one teacher who gave them a really hard time, they picked him up and they threw him down the well.
Wow.
So it was rowdy. Yeah. I mean, all right, guys and girls, in order to maintain some journalistic integrity, I have to clarify some things here, to be honest. I went back to my brothers and I asked them to share the story again, as I hadn't heard it in a while. Did this event take place? Yes, it did. But my brothers were witnesses to this, not actually the players. Apparently, I mixed up two different events. My brother did go with his friends to intimidate the school teachers in a separate instance, and in that situation, they only spoke with the teachers and just made some halagulla and came back home. This particular instance took place separately in their school by much bigger players. They weren't involved in that, unfortunately. Hope that's clarified. Yeah, and then they left. I was like, how did you get away with all that stuff? But this apparently went down in Pakistan. This kind of stuff was all the time, like teachers versus students. Teachers got a gang of their own, the students got a gang of their own. In government schools, that's what happens. And this was in Lahore.
This is Lahore, okay.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, I hope that kind of stuff doesn't still take place. I think in private schools, they've almost completely removed it in Pakistan. Not a lot of private schools do it anymore. But government schools, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Be a good thing to find out. Yeah, I know. You think about punishment. We had we were like, I guess 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, so we were still like kids, right? We weren't like high schoolers. We weren't any sort of threat to the teachers. And I guess because a lot of the teachers we had were super young, that sometimes they would they would use like whiteboard erasers, especially the young ladies. They'd hit with like a whiteboard eraser or a ruler, and it just wouldn't be effective, and they weren't willing to do something else. And so at some point, I remember we just a lot of us just stopped listening to them. We had one teacher, I think she was an art teacher, maybe it was an Islamiyat teacher or something. But her punishment was, she just resorted one day to the punishment of, you get to stand up and put your arms, stand up if you did something wrong. Next step was put your arms out and then stand on your chair. And at one point, the whole class was standing up with the arms out. And then she made us stand on the chair. I'm not sure why that was a punishment, but we had to stand on our chair and then stand on top of our desk. And that was a punishment. The whole class is out there staying on the desk with punishments. And then one of my friends just yells, "What now, teacher? What now?" And she just burst into tears and ran out the room.
There was one punishment called the teacher would tell you to become a chicken. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh,
murga. Become a murga.
I know of other people had to do it. We did. That wasn't one in our school, but yeah. And then walk around the schoolyard.
Yeah, you'd have to grab your ears from under your legs. So bring your arms from under your legs and then grab your ears. And then, try to walk like that.
Oh, I have seen somebody do that at that school. I totally forgot about that. Oh, man. Yeah.
It's called being a chicken, apparently. Murga bano.
A murga.
Murga, yeah.
Oh, man.
So, yeah. I didn't have many school memories there, obviously. I only went for 1 grade, and then before that, kindergarten. But it's already,
okay.
Even those are just enough to laugh about.
Yeah, it's good times, man. Just all kinds of good times.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, you kind of subtly mentioned having the non-Muslim class and a Muslim class, right? Now, remember, in our school, it wasn't an English medium school, but in our school, they did have two classes. I never questioned which one was which or anything. But I wonder now if it had anything to do with that. But, growing up as a Muslim, obviously, in a majority, whether it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim or not, but you're a majority in any country, right? You don't feel these things oftentimes, I think. So, for example, my experience growing up in the U.S. obviously will be a little different from a regular, kind of like a white Southern Catholic person growing up over here. Because especially in Pakistan, I haven't heard from many people who grew up like outside of the majority. The only minority that I've spoken to is the Shia. They're about 10, 20% of the population. Still not that bad. They still have a community. There's Christians in Pakistan. There's Hindus in Pakistan. I don't hear from them much. I haven't found somebody for the podcast yet who is like that. But then of course, you would be another great example of this.
I guess the only other non-Muslims at the school were Hindus. There were a few Hindus. I think the school overall is about maybe 80 kids. Mm-hmm. My recollection is about 10 Hindus. And so anyway, just in the background. But of course, you're always sticking out no matter what, right? I'm white. One of the best compliments I got, I don't think I'll ever forget it. I got into a rickshaw one day. Mm-hmm. And I had a shalwar kameez on, and I was going somewhere. And I was taking both my sisters and a family friend. We're in the back of the rickshaw, and we were going somewhere. And so I jumped in, I was sitting next to the guy driving, and so I was talking to him where to go, and I was speaking Sindhi to him. And I remember him asking me if I was a Pathan, if I was Pashtun.
Because you're so light-skinned, yeah.
Yeah, but at least it's Pakistani, and I thought, wow. Yeah. This guy thinks I could be Pakistani. Yeah. This is fantastic. Of course, like for him, like that's like super far away. That might be the most foreign person he can imagine being around. But still, like it was, it felt like you fit in for a minute, right? It felt really good. And I think, so there's always kind of that sense of like being different and, kind of wanting to fit in, but there's so many gaps, right? But I think people are always super welcoming. Super hospitable. We were always at people's houses, eating food, people trying to make us feel welcome and succeeding in doing so. I always felt very, very welcome. Mm-hmm.
So you had a good experience with the locals overall?
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. What did you do in your free time outside of school, like on the weekends and stuff?
That's a good question. We had, I guess we had lots of family friends. We folks who just met in the area. And so we'd go to, people's houses for different functions or whatnot. Like I said, we lived in the second story of a larger house, and our landlord lived below, and he had some kids and so we used to go down there and play with them, right? And then friends from school would hang out with them. But I was quite young, so in Larkana at least quite young. So it was mostly going to family friend's house, hanging out with my friends, or
Got it. Okay. And I think this is the last question I have about Pakistan. One or two great things about living there that you remember, and then one or two not so great things.
Yeah, it's a great country. There are great peoples, and, overall great people, and then lots of people groups that are just fantastic and super interesting that got to meet and be exposed to. And like I mentioned, the hospitality before. That's just overwhelming hospitality. And so that's super eye-opening in how to be hospitable to, like you said, I come in places where, people maybe are not used to, catering to some folks like my family and didn't have any good reason to, except for they wanted to, right? And so that's what a great example and something to learn from. Things I miss, I miss food, right? I miss food an incredible amount. I'm sure you do. Yeah. In fact, we found, there's a great Karachi restaurant, Barbecue Tonight. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yeah. They okay. I'm not sure if it's a chain, but there was one in Texas actually where I lived, Barbecue Tonight. But I'm not sure if it's a chain. So.
Well, a guy from Lahore opened one here in Dublin, and so I was super excited when I found it.
Nice.
Get some good halim or whatnot. Fantastic. And I think one thing great about Pakistan is the geography. So we're down in the desert, right? The desert has its own type of beauty, but it's certainly an acquired taste in many ways. But if you go up north and you just get fantastic and incredibly, just incredible vistas. It's just go to Hunza, the Hindu Kush, around the Pamir Knot, or up in that area. It's incredible, right?
So you traveled all that, meaning you weren't just sitting in one place. That's good. You actually went around.
Yeah, I mean, when we first got to Larkana, we flew into Islamabad. Yeah. We spent maybe a month or so in Islamabad and up to Natia Gully and Murray, so up in that area.
Oh, wow.
And then we bought a car, Suzuki Bolan, a little van, and then drove down to Larkana. And so, that trip, so it was right when we got there. It's about a 3-day trip. Yeah. So got to see a good bit, stop in Multan and places like that, So immediately got to see a number of spots. And so then throughout the time there, traveled to Islamabad a ton, up, way north of Islamabad, Lahore. Mm-hmm. The thing I regret is I've never been to Baluchistan or any of those areas. Yeah. And that's most of my family has, but for whatever reason I didn't get to make it out there. So love to go to Quetta. Haven't been.
Yeah.
I'll go someday.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. Honestly, I've never been to Balochistan either. So it's one of the overlooked provinces, actually. It's the largest province by size, actually, in Pakistan, but not many people go as much. So it doesn't get as much visibility or spotlight in the media either. Most of the focus is often on Punjab and some parts of Sindh.
And usually when it gets media, it's always for not pleasant reasons, since we have a lot of
exactly. Yeah. A lot of the political tension comes up a lot. Yeah, especially nowadays. I think last few years. Yeah. What about the 1-2 things that you did not like so much? And it's completely okay, by the way. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna shoot you or anything like that. For being open, I'm completely open to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's always I think growing up in a place where your family's not from, and so like Pakistan is I think society is very strong in a country like Pakistan, and government's much weaker, right? A lot of life revolves around familial ties, other societal ties. It's just very apparent. It's much different in the U.S. where a political identity is super important, way more important than society in many ways. And so you're always the outsider in a place like that. It's just more and more apparent. And so, that's just, it's not always pleasant. And so that's nothing to do with Pakistan, really, I guess. That's just the fact that I was a obvious foreigner tooling around. So that's one thing. And it's growing up in a place like Larkana, it's something I'm very thankful for, but it's complicated. But seeing poverty right along with wealth and sort of seeing that disparity, I come from the U.S. There's lots of security there, and very apparent. It met lots and lots of people who just don't have sort of that financial or whatever security, and so I think as a kid that can be tough to see, but it's a real world, so it's also good to see.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, some of the things I've seen in Pakistan are unimaginable sometimes over here. I remember one time when I was 10 years old, seeing on the streets this guy, kind of a disabled guy. His legs weren't working. Now, he didn't have a wheelchair. He was on some type of mat type thing, some kind of wood board, and then he was dragging himself on the street with his hands. So he was basically on his stomach, and he was dragged. I was again, as a 10-year-old, I was kind of traumatized to see that, because I wasn't used to even those few years in living in the U.S. But keep in mind, 10 years is not that long. My life is still getting shaped, so I hadn't seen much of disability in general. But then on top of that, to see that, and then come back to the U.S. and be able to compare to, I started noticing more of the treatment of disabled people and and similar types of folks over here. And it was night and day. I was that starts getting you interested in why those facilities don't exist always in some countries or some places.
Yeah, it's heavy, right? That's a heavy thing for a 10-year-old to see. And then, you say that. I remember seeing a man. We saw people like that frequently, right? And it's heartbreaking. And then I see, at sort of a different level, I remember seeing a man sort of position someone who's disabled to beg at a good spot. Because they were presumably part of some sort of begging ring, right? And so this disabled person is getting taken advantage of in even a different way than is apparent at first, and just sort of, being aware of that can be heavy for a kid.
Yeah, not a lot of focus on that.
It's truth, right? I'm fortunate that it's not real. It's not actual. Not my own experience, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very real suffering going on.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Absolutely. You moved out of Pakistan to Thailand, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which year was that?
It was, we were in Karachi in 2001 when 9/11 happened. And so we had to leave Karachi for a few months. So finished 2001 outside of Karachi and actually in Thailand. Came back in 2002, January, and were there up through July or so. So the summer of 2002. And that was right when, you may or may not remember that sort of tensions between India and Pakistan were getting really hot. I mean, tensions were high. It was.
Sorry, you mentioned 9/11. Was there something that pushed you out of there from Pakistan due to that?
There were, we were Americans, right? Living in Karachi, openly. We didn't, there were some folks that lived in compounds or whatnot. We didn't live that way. I guess our organization, we didn't, I don't think my parents wanted to leave, but our organization asked that we leave the country for a little while until we knew what was going to happen. So I think within 24 hours of 48 hours of the towers falling, we had gotten a flight and gone to Thailand just to wait to see what had happened.
Yeah. Okay. So then you ended up moving to Thailand, 2002, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. Which part of Thailand were you in?
We're in Chiang Mai in the north.
Okay. How many years were you there?
So I think I did my 10th, 11th, and 12th grade high school years there, so 3 years.
In Thailand, okay.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned China after that. You've really been around, so it's really interesting to talk about your timeline. It's Pakistan to Thailand, and then...
It's back in the U.S.
Back to the U.S.
Yeah, I was back in the U.S. for school, went to undergrad, grad school, worked for a few years, and then in 2016, I went to Shanghai. Moved to Shanghai. Was there until 2019, then came here to Ireland.
Yeah, and then Shanghai, it was mostly for work, I'm guessing, right? For GNC.
Yeah, it was for work. Yeah, so during my undergrad years, I lived in a couple different cities in China studying Chinese Mandarin.
Yeah.
But I didn't really live there after that until I moved there for work. The deal with Pakistan is I was a little kid when I was there, and about 8 years old to about 15 years old. So those are formative years, right? So there's just there's like a tie there that's different than other places. I'd say in Pakistan, it's, folks are incredibly warm. People are incredibly warm, and food is wonderful, and you feel tied to a very long history. At least certainly in Sindh, you feel tied to a very long history all the time. Negatives, society is not quite as open, right? For reasons I just mentioned before, as maybe other places. It's not as easy to get around, especially, sisters and my mother's not as easy to get around in many cases in conservative areas of the country. Thailand's just an easy place to be. I don't know if you've been there, but I'm sure you don't need to be told. It's an easy place to travel or hang out. It's kind of
very accessible.
A big part of the economy is tourism, so it's an easy place to be. But for me, I don't have deep connections to Thailand at all. So it's a nice place to be, but not a deep tie-in. And then China. I love China. I enjoyed living there. I'll probably live there again. Both my boys are Chinese, and I speak Chinese. And it's an I think the deal with China right now is it's an exciting place to be. There's been so much change the last couple decades. Yeah. That people have seen so much change, like quality of life change in their lifetime, just new things. That's just an expectation that things will change in the future. It's an expectation that I can't really see what's going to happen. And there's a freshness and newness to that. It's fun to be a part of. So if you speak Chinese, it can be, in my opinion, if you can speak Chinese and kind of see some of those things, it can be very fun, a ton of fun, and just super interesting.
Super interesting, yeah. Chinese is one of the up and coming languages, I think, of the future, especially for business. They say it's actually really beneficial to learn some Chinese. Up. It may be here. It may be here already. It'll be. Yeah. Exactly. I think so. Not just the future, but it's a tough language to pick up, right? It's a difficult language.
Oh, they're all tough. They're all tough.
Are you fairly fluent in Chinese and in Mandarin?
I am. So I can work and operate in Chinese. So when I guess I worked basically exclusively in Chinese. So it's, whatever that means. Professional efficiency.
Okay, last question I had for you, Kennedy, was how do you look back on Pakistan now? Not necessarily your time spent over there, but you mentioned, of course, you were looking at China, Pakistan, the economic corridor, CPEC. How do you look at the country now?
Yeah. I haven't been back in 15 years. I took a friend there 15 years ago, right at the year I graduated high school, and we went to Hyderabad, Karachi, Larkana. Travel around. Is wonderful, and I will go back. I want to take my wife and my kids when we're kind of stabilized a little bit. When the world opens up, maybe in a couple of years, it'd be perfect.
That's great.
But how I look, I mean, I feel like it's an underrated place in terms of like, I guess in two ways. In terms of like the warmth and sort of this sort of special nature of the people that live in Pakistan, and then two, I mean, it's an influential country. It's a huge country. Probably be top 5, top 6 in terms of population in 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And then it's sitting between, and then, for years it sat between Afghanistan and India when Afghanistan was the hotbed of, just a big focus. And now we're seeing Pakistan playing a role with China and India. I mean, it's just an important place no matter how you look at it, but it's definitely not something that's on people's radar.
Yeah. Oftentimes, yeah.
Yeah, and so I feel like it's very much underrated in that way. So I guess past 15 years, some sadness. I've seen some things happen. Hope. I'm excited. Like I was looking at CPEC. I was interested in CPEC because there's a lot of good investment and infrastructure to be put in the country, and that gives me lots of hope. And so I keep an eye on that. I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah.
There's a way I can get involved. I would like to, but interesting to see what happens. Well, one thing just came to mind. I was talking to a friend in Karachi, maybe like 4 or 5 weeks ago. Someone I went to school with, and we were talking about Hunza, and he had just gone for the first time in his whole life. He's always been in Karachi. He's just not left much, and I've been a bunch. I just assumed other people had gone, but to your point, people travel to varying degrees, right? And it's just such a wonderful area. But I remember last time I went to Hunza, every time I've been there, and I've been maybe 5-6 times, at one point involves like a 16 to 20 hour bus ride up the KKH in the ways that I went. And that's it can be a fun bus ride, but it can be quite harrowing. Like I remember one time, did an all night bus ride, made some stop in the middle of the night, and these roads are tiny. I mean, and just winding upright. But we got out. It's like 1 a.m. Got out, threw some water on our faces from a nearby stream. And the bus driver calls everybody around, and he has this big torch, big flashlight, and he's on the side of the road, and he's pointing everybody to look down. And there's just a bus like ours laying on its side, charred. And he said, "This happened 2 nights ago. Everybody died." Back on the bus.
And you're supposed
everybody's
to be calm
just
about
like
it.
everybody were like all bleary eyed, and we're just like, what? Oh, okay, get back on the bus. And like I remember, like that's how we traveled every time up there. But when I was talking to this buddy, he was telling me how much investment's been put in roads and hotels in the area, and it's just it seems like the past 5 years there's just so much change up there. It's such a much different place, and that makes me excited. There are campaigns to get tourists up to Hunza, domestic tourists, within Pakistan itself, to get up to Hunza and get up to those areas, and that's exciting. People should go see Gilgit. They should have gone seen Gilgit a long time ago, and it's good that money's being put in, and that gives you a lot of hope, right? A lot of pride. So it's
absolutely.
Good to see.
Last year was a pretty good year, I think, for Pakistan in terms of tourism. It got a lot of spotlight, actually. There were a lot of YouTubers, vloggers going to Pakistan, like non-Pakistanis. It was getting a lot of coverage, actually. So that was pretty good. This year has been, I think, slower, mostly due to COVID. Not a lot of traveling going on in general. So it's been kind of a sad year for traveling in general across the world. But Pakistan's been doing pretty well, I think, relatively speaking, versus 10 years ago or so, when the borders were like almost completely closed, and the war was at its peak. It kind of limited traveling to Pakistan and nearby countries quite a bit. That's gotten gradually a lot better.
Well, I mean, I think domestic travel's been up this year. At least it seems like. I know a guy runs a sort of a new, like a tech startup travel agency. So not a travel agency, but a tech startup that does travel. I think they're up 30% year over year just because of COVID, right? For just domestic travel.
Just for domestic,
They're getting killed on international, of course, but domestic is up. So hopefully hopefully spark more internal movement and get more investment, which would lead to more tourism. Because there's, like I said, wonderful places to see and wonderful people to meet. So
yeah,
I hope to go back soon.
Yeah. Pakistani, conversations can be pretty interesting. You mentioned that bus incident. I think I've never seen a bus fall, but people used to mention it a lot. And my mom's hometown, where she grew up, is a very mountainous region, and obviously, thankfully, not as bad as the ones up there and around Hunza or North Pakistan in general, but still pretty bad. There will be really twisty and windy roads. I remember I was a kid, so I used to throw up, get nauseous. Yeah. Very difficult drives. Very, very difficult. And yeah, you look right outside your bus window or your car's window, and then there was your tire, and there was maybe like a foot of road, and then that's it. It's down. There's no fencing. Very few places.
Those guys drive with abandon.
Yeah. It was crazy. Those little Bedford trucks, those trucks, those decorated trucks. Yeah, those don't often really have really powerful engines, so they're like struggling to go uphill, and they're carrying a ton of weight on them, right? Cement and whatever, bricks. And I remember, these guys would be really struggling on some of these hills because we lived on a hill too, our house over there.
Oh, so you just see them go by.
Yeah. You see some of them get stuck, and then what they do is, like, one guy would get out and put a brick behind the truck's tires so that it would not roll back, and then they keep trying, like, and eventually, it was insane. Yeah, but back then, it was kind of normal to see that. But the whole what the bus driver said, like, these guys just died 2 days ago. It's really sad, but it's also kind of dark. It makes me think of some of our talking styles are very direct sometimes, and it comes off as dark. Like, for example, there was a funny joke about this that somebody was mentioning about how Pakistani people talk, and one of them was like, if you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, well, you have high cholesterol or something, right, or high blood pressure, and you go and you tell your friend might be like, hey, why are you so worried? And you'll be like, well, my doctor said I have pretty high blood pressure, so I need to start taking control of my body and myself. Then your friend would be like, is that motivating you or anything? Your friend would be like, dude, I just knew somebody who died a week ago from high blood pressure. And it's like, what? Is that supposed to help me out?
Sounds helpful.
Yeah. Like my dad just got diabetes. Oh, really? Okay. My uncle just died from diabetes 2 weeks ago. And so it comes out pretty dark.
that reminds me, my dad was on a PI, so we used to fly these 44-seater Fokker airplanes, and fly Karachi to Larkana, and so we, that's how we oftentimes went back and forth. And my dad was on one time. So he was by himself. So this is his story, but he said that it kept, turbulence is really bad. Those aren't the best planes, and they would just keep dropping. Just like, I don't know, 100 feet, like ridiculous, just drop, like stomach in your throat, like type of drop. And it was just rattling, just crazy, crazy, like unnerving him. And he's been on all types of flights. Yeah. And he said the co-pilot came out and, came into the aisle and said, excuse me, we're experiencing a lot of turbulence. We're in a storm, but what can I do? And turn around and back in. You're like, what are you doing? What was the point of that message? Just letting everybody know.
Somebody asked him. Yeah, somebody probably asked him. That sparks a lot of memories. I don't know if you know Dave Chappelle. He's one of my favorite comedians. Yes, I watch him a lot. He was mentioning something that I related to a lot. He's like, you're on a flight and there's turbulence and you get kind of nervous, right? And I know I'm kind of a nervous flyer too, and I've flown a lot. But if I don't fly for a few months, and then I fly again, and then turbulence hits, I get nervous. I have kind of an anxious personality. But then the first thing you do is you look at the flight attendants, and usually they look pretty calm. They're just walking around or they're just sitting down, but they look pretty calm. And you look at them and you're like, okay, she probably knows what's up, and she probably deals with this all the time. So this is probably nothing out of the ordinary. I'll survive, right? I'll be fine, and that gives you some comfort. But then if the flight attendant is freaking out, she's just like, there was, I think, one YouTube video that went viral. It was like the pilot started telling everybody to start praying because of turbulence. But I was like, if I was on that flight, again, I know as a Muslim, it's good to probably say some prayers anyway, and have some faith that you'll be fine.
So it's different at being good to say a prayer to being instructed to by the guy flying the airplane. That's a very different thing.
Yeah, exactly. A pilot should probably not be saying that, be freaking out.
Well, Love, I enjoyed hearing the story of your brother's raiding the school.
Yeah.
There's something I love about it, but it's interesting. It reminds me of, I'm telling you, man, like that school next to us, you just see like, they're also older than us. So we were like these little fourth graders looking up and you see these hands come across and these kids climb over the wall. And sometimes they jump and run.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you'd be like, what's going on in there?
Yeah. Yeah,
can I go in there?
It's like what's it called?
Huge kids coming out.
It's like an asylum. It's like an asylum. You're screaming out of there.
Well, they'd have their orange starter camise on, and they'd be like, they're like 15, 16 years old, so they're like little men to, they're like huge men to us, and we're just like, what?
Yeah. Those kids are hardened. Yeah, they're very hardened. They're living a tough life, so you got to be tough or you get crushed. Yeah. Awesome.
Hey,
well, thanks, Kennedy. I'll be in touch next few weeks. Great talking to you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Enjoy your holiday, man.
Yeah. You too. All right. Take care. Bye.
Cheers.
Just a quick request before we log off. Have you been listening to Popcorn for a while and enjoying it? Or are you a first-time listener? If you enjoy Popcorn, we'd love to get your support on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/popcorn and sign up to keep this podcast running for as long as possible. If you're a new listener and would love to hear more, remember to hit subscribe and follow us on Instagram or Twitter. See you next time. Khudafis.